Welcome, in front of me is a OnePlus Nord, and today I'll go over unboxing along with a brief overview of this phone. So, it's basically brand new, and let's see, packaging looks fairly premium honestly, really nice. But we're not here for the packaging, so let's pop out the phone. And let's get it out of this, there we go. Now the phone is already set up, and I'm gonna first go over the content of the box and then to the phone. So, inside we get paperwork with some brochure basically saying that hey, we want to go back to the roots of making semi-budget phones. That's basically all they say, and thanks to the team. Then we get the little flip right here with some stickers, Nord, and just paperwork that no one really cares about, so drop that to the side. And then we get the casing. A really nice touch that OnePlus I think fairly frequently adds casing to it. I really enjoy that gesture of adding actually protection to your phone. Then inside we also get the warp charger. It's a fairly good charger, so thumbs up for that. And it's also a really nice thing to see comparing to some other companies in the recent timing that decided to not even include chargers, or they're planning not to. And then we get the cable. Now as you can see, everything is the nice red-white branding colors of OnePlus. So yeah, now there's nothing else in the box. It's a fairly hefty box for a fairly limited amount of content inside of it, but it looks really nice. So here we go, there's the phone. Now let's slap in the case also to see how it looks like with the case. And does look really, it looks decent honestly. Not really sure what the shape's supposed to resemble here. It's kind of like matte, as you can see, comparing to this being just completely glossy almost. It also comes with like this little flap that can plug into your Type-C port, so I guess you don't collect dirt in there if it's in your pocket. So yeah, the casing looks really nice, although there's one thing that I personally just don't like, that might be just me. Almost every manufacturer makes that, well, includes their cases. They make these weird kind of lips around here. As you can see, it does protrude fairly obnoxiously out of it, and it is to protect the device from basically hitting the ground with the display. And also if you tend to place it like so on the display side to the table, then it won't scratch because it has basically kitty bumpers protecting the display. But it adds this unnecessary edge to it, which I just kind of don't like. So yeah, I'll probably get a different case, even though this one looks really nice. It does have these bumpers which just kind of break the case for me. So moving on to the actual phone itself, let me actually first just get rid of all the fingerprints from it. There we go, quick cleaning up, and there we go. So as you can see, there's the display. It's a fairly nice display, honestly, and it does actually look really nice in hand. What it kind of caught me off guard is the fact that this is a fairly big device. I was expecting it to be way smaller, and even when you're holding it in your hand, doesn't really feel all that big. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but if you ever held, for instance, Mate 20 Pro, like I have one right here, it's, at least when I got it, it felt really big in hand. And comparing it to this one, my Mate 20 Pro is actually smaller than this. As you can see, it fully hides behind the device right here. So it's almost the same size. The OnePlus is a little bit wider. So yeah. So going back to the display, it's a 6.44 inch display. It's a what they call fluid AMOLED, so just an OLED display in other words, with a resolution of 1080p by 2400, which puts it at 408 pixels per inch, so fairly dense display. Now it ain't gonna be anything like 4K or at least Full HD plus, but honestly I haven't seen many flagships this year honestly that did go with the like above 1080p, and personally I don't mind it. I don't really see any difference between those displays, so just a nice 1080p display is all good enough for me. The fact that it's an OLED display adds to that value, and that's all I really care about. And you just brighten it up. There we go. And also it has a 86.7% screen to body ratio, so fairly small bezels. It's actually, I would have put it a little bit higher, closer to like 90. It looks really slim. There is minimal bezels, so it kind of, I'm not really sure why the percentage is not higher. I mean, obviously the percentage is how much the bezels are, but it feels like the bezels are just fairly minimalistic and almost invisible when you're holding it in hand. The only like bezel that I can see clearly, honestly, it's the one right here. Other than that, it's just kind of like the rounding of the corners of the device, along with the plastic addition between like the frame and the display. So when you drop the phone, it does act like a bumper to the display, which a lot of Chinese manufacturers do that, from what I've seen before. And also, going back to the display, it is a 90 Hz display. Now, that is also really amazing that they included a 90 Hz display. Some other manufacturers, for instance Samsung, which I'm not exactly sure if that's true or not, but for instance with their Note 20 lineup, if you're not going for the top tier Note, apparently it's not gonna have anything above 60. So here we got a device for like $400 that has 90 Hz. Now I've seen people complaining about it, that it's not the best, but it's also not a flagship, so it doesn't need to be the best. And the inclusion of 90 Hz display, in my book, is a complete and utter win. And also, obviously it's an OLED, so it has HDR10 certification. Then moving to the back of the device, we have the quadruple camera setup. Now this is where the phone kind of falls down in terms of quality, I would say. It does have a 48 megapixel wide sensor, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel depth, and 2 megapixel macro. And honestly, the cameras are just okay. At least the main 48 megapixel sensor is just okay-ish. It's nothing special. It won't really capture that great of pictures. In normal circumstances, it does capture them fairly well, but if you start to zoom in, you will see some noise, and just the picture kind of looks mediocre at best, I would call it. And apart from that, for instance, things like the macro lens, which is 2 megapixels, it's complete trash. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's literally trash. And as an example, I did capture a couple of photos here, which I still have open. Let me just go back so I have differentiate between them. So this is, I believe, the macro, or not even. Let me actually quickly capture the two photos here. I have basically a carpet, and that is right over here, which this is what it is. So let's quickly remove those. And sorry, I can't do that on the camera. So let me just, it's gonna be, I'm gonna capture one with the normal camera, then I'm gonna use a zoom. And then I'm actually gonna use the macro lens, which allows me to get in closer. Okay, so now that I captured it, we can look at the photos. So the last one is the macro, this is the zoom, and this is the normal. So let's look at the normal. As you can see, it looks fairly okay. It does look, well, decent. It's fairly detailed. If we go to the zoom, it allows us to get way closer in there and see more of the threads of the carpet, basically. And if we go for the macro, you can start to see that it just kind of falls apart. Now my hand was steady, as you can see in all those shots, and it just doesn't look as good. And just as an example, I kind of removed the photo while that, let's just capture it again then. But as you've seen already, it doesn't look anything special. Okay, now that I captured it again, we can go back to this, and as you can see, maybe it came out a little bit better, but as you've probably seen, the zoom looks way better than the macro. So you can see this is the 2 times zoom from the normal 48 megapixel, while this is the macro, and it just falls apart. Now, as an example, I'm gonna bring in my 2-year-old phone, if not more. It's the Mate 20 Pro, which I did the same photos just as a way to compare it, and this does kind of makes a funny comparison once the photo loads for some reason. There we go. So this is captured with my macro lens, and we can actually zoom in here, and as you can see, this is just a completely whole new world. And as a comparison, this phone costs roughly, I think, the same amount at this moment, if not cheaper. So you're not really getting much for your money in terms of cameras here. Now, like I heard other people say, the probably reason why we have 4 sensors here is just to bump up the amount, well, the number of cameras, just so it looks better on paper. Other than that, probably the lens that you should stick with is the 48 megapixel, just a default lens to shooting all the normal photos. The macro and depth are just kind of useless, and it doesn't really matter if they are there. If you're trying to shoot macro, I strongly advise you to just go for the photo, disable the macro, and go for the 2 times zoom, which will come out to be way better than the macro itself. So just a little tip in terms of capturing close-up photos. Now, when it comes down to also the back cameras, they shoot video at 4K 30 frames, and that's kind of where it gets funny. We have 2 sensors at the front, so we have a 32 megapixel wide and 8 megapixel ultra wide. And just to go into the there we go. We can go into the settings and video resolution, and here comes the hilarious part of it. This is the rear, the quad camera setup that shoots at 4K 30 max. Then if we go to the front, we can shoot at 4K 60. So I guess the phone is for bloggers, because I don't really see any other reason why the back camera is worse than the front camera in this case, in terms of recording video. I assume there is no optical stabilization or any kind of stabilization in it for the 4K 60, so it might be just kind of like a complete unstabilized mess. But still, the fact that the rear camera isn't shooting at 60 is a little bit of an insult, I would say, to the camera department here, if it wasn't already apparent enough with the 2 cameras that are basically useless. So that is kind of a disappointing part of this device. Now, when it comes down to specs of this phone, there is multiple variants. So we have 6 gig RAM version, which comes with 64 memory. Then we have 128, which comes with 8 gigs of memory, and then 256 gigs with 12 gigs of memory. And all of those have the option of, well, not option, but they come with a UFS storage 2.1, which won't be necessarily as good. Even the phone that came out from OnePlus like two or 1 year ago, was OnePlus, I think 7 Pro, had UFS 3.0, which is just a way better storage type than this. It will transfer files and just deal with data way faster than this phone will, apparently, or approximately twice as fast. So that's a huge jump in terms of memory performance, or storage performance in this case. So it is in a way a budget device, or, well, mid-spec device, but it does kind of suffer in certain cases where I would personally probably rather see less cameras and better storage. And moving on, the device comes with a Snapdragon 765G. So again, it falls under that mid-range category, with a battery of capacity of 4115 milliamps, and it does have that, like I said, the warp charger, which charges at 30 watts, and it's approximately 70% of the battery in 30 minutes, so you will be getting a fairly decent charge out of this. So thumbs up to the battery department. It is a fairly good phone in terms of just how long it will last and how quick it charges. And apart from that, it comes with also 2 different colors. The one that I have right here is the Onyx Gray, or Gray Onyx. It does look fairly nice. Nothing really special, I would say. There's no kind of weird effect on it. And the other one is the blue marble, which you've probably seen everybody else, at least videos have. And also, things that you cannot see, it does have a under display fingerprint, that's what I meant to say, which is just a normal optical one. It works fairly okay. Can quickly add one just to get a sense of it. Fingerprint unlock. Let's go with the pattern, quickly set it up. So let's scan it. So you can do it quickly. Now while I'm scanning my finger, I'm also going to add that the device, even though it looks like it has a metal frame, it is completely plastic. The frame is plastic, the buttons are not, and the back is glass. The back and front is glass, obviously. So let's stop, I'm done. So there we go, there is our fingerprint, and let's just quickly. So you can see it does work fairly well. It doesn't really struggle with unlocking. It works quickly, quicker than, for instance, my device, and you can simply tap on it almost and it will unlock it, as you just seen right now. So half a second seems to do the trick to unlock the device. So it is fairly good of a sensor on here, so props to that. Now as you probably already see the pattern, it's not going to be the best in anything. There were obvious costs cut everywhere. Although personally I think the most important to me is the display, and the display seems to be really good. It's probably what I would want to have in the device, so I don't really care about the any majority of the parts of it. I would like to have a better camera. The fact that the phone is plastic doesn't really bother me that much. Costs need to be cut somewhere, and it does feel fairly good. It is a fairly hefty device, like I said before, but it does cost about $400, so you do pay less for the device that feels fairly premium. Highlight on the feels fairly premium because it does fall out in almost every other aspect apart from the display. And yeah, to conclude this, it's a really decent device, I have to say. Not sure if it's worth $400. I am fairly, well, I really like OnePlus's phones, specifically the fact that they come with their own Oxygen OS, which is almost a stock Android with additions to it. So they don't really change the Android feel, but they add to it. And you have customizations that, well, normally on the stock Android you would not have, but it's not jammed in here to the point that it just looks kind of disgusting like some other devices, for instance LG, where everything just looks meh. They did their UI is just kind of not my style. So here we get the stock look of Android, and it just feels like a typical Android, but they do add a lot of customization to it, which you can choose to use or not. And that I really appreciate. This is personally my favorite skin of Android, and I would choose that over any other one. And apart from this, like I said, the device is just, in other words, mediocre. And if I have to choose, honestly, I personally would probably rather drop some more money and get one of the cheap, more budget versions of the OnePlus, but the top spec. So like the, what was it, OnePlus 8 or 7, which one? I think it was 8, the newest one. Just not go for the Pro version of it. The normal one should be good enough for me. It will cost, well, significantly more, I believe like twice as much, but I prefer to have more, well, performance out of the device and better cameras, even though the 48 megapixel sensor here is the same one as on the OnePlus 8. I still prefer to pay more to have just a generally better experience. And there are additional things that you pay for, well, in that twice as much price range, like I think higher refresh rate of the display, better cameras, and IP ratings, along with wireless charging. Sorry for that. So yeah, it's personally just my opinion. here. And if you're looking for a budget device, or well, maybe not budget but mid-range, this device is fairly good, I have to say. And for me, if I would have to buy a mid-range device and have about $400 to $500 to spend, personally I probably would go for this one. I don't really see any other options. I'm not gonna be getting any Huawei, which they come in that price range. Realme also comes in that price range, but I also am not a fan of their OS, or how the Android looks like on there. So it really boils down to the fact that the phone looks, overall the Android looks better on here than it does on any other device. And this is probably what is most important to me. I would rather like to see better cameras, but if I have to have something that looks like kind of like a garbage or a kid's phone, comparing to having a better camera, I think I just prefer to have something that looks cleaner and shoots a little bit of a worse photo. But yeah, this will, I guess, conclude the overview of the device. And if you found this video helpful in any way, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.